My New Year's Eve party ended not with a toast, but with a knife in my hand and the chilling realization that the man I loved had just tried to give away my entire life. The air in my apartment hummed with the specific frequency of a good party. It was a low, thrumming bass line of laughter, the clink of glasses, and a cheesy 90s playlist that Leo insisted was classic. From my perch in the open-plan kitchen, I had a panoramic view of the life I'd built. My friends were mingling with his. Twinkle lights I'd painstakingly strung across the ceiling cast a warm, golden glow on their faces, and the scent of cinnamon and pine from the real tree in the corner, mixed with the aroma of mulled wine on the stove. It was perfect. It was my perfect. My apartment, my friends, my New Year's Eve. I smiled to myself, the rhythmic thump, thump, thump of my chef's knife against the wooden cutting board, a steady, grounding beat. I was making my signature winter salad, the one with pomegranate seeds, candied pecans, and a pear vinaigrette that took forever to get right. It was my contribution to the potluck of our lives. Leo, my boyfriend of a year and a half, was the host with the most. He was circulating, a bottle of champagne in one hand, his other arm slung easily around someone's shoulders, his laugh the loudest thing in the room. He had moved in 6 months ago, and in many ways he fit into the space, into my life, as if he'd always been there. He filled the silences, he made me laugh, and he had this incredible ability to make everything feel like an adventure. His mother, Brenda, was a different story. She was holding court on my velvet green sofa, a piece of furniture I had saved for 8 months to buy. She surveyed the room with the critical eye of a health inspector, a tight, polite smile plastered on her face. Every compliment she'd given me tonight had a hidden barb. "Oh, this little place is just so cozy," she'd said upon arriving, her eyes flicking to the slightly too small for a family dining area. "And you decorated it all by yourself? How resourceful." I'd just smiled and offered her a drink, chalking it up to a generational difference, or maybe just the classic wariness of a mother seeing her precious son build a life with someone new. Leo always said she just needed time to warm up. I was meticulously arranging slivers of pear over the arugula when Leo's voice cut through the chatter. Everyone, can I have your attention for a moment?" The music softened, and all eyes turned to him. He was standing near the Christmas tree, his face flushed with excitement, and maybe a little too much champagne. He looked handsome, his dark hair falling across his forehead, his eyes sparkling under the twinkle lights. He raised his glass. "First of all," he began, his voice warm and charismatic, "I just want to thank you all for being here to ring in the new year with us. It means the world." He glanced over at me in the kitchen and blew a kiss. I smiled back, my heart doing a little flutter. This past year has been incredible, and a huge part of that is because of this amazing woman right here. A few of our friends, Ed, and I felt a blush creep up my neck. I wiped my hands on my apron, leaning against the counter. She's taught me so much about love, about partnership, about what it means to build a home, he continued, his gaze still locked on me. And in the spirit of the new year, a time for new beginnings and resolutions, I've decided to make one of my own. My resolution is to take care of the people who matter most, to put family first, always. He then turned his body slightly, shifting his focus from me to the woman on my green sofa. And there's no one who deserves a fresh, happy start more than my mom. Brenda's tight smile softened into a look of genuine surprise. She placed a hand on her chest. My friends looked on, their expressions full of warm anticipation. I assumed he'd bought her a car, or maybe was announcing he was paying for a big trip for her. She'd been complaining about her tiny rented condo for months, about the leaky faucets and noisy neighbors. "Mom," Leo said, his voice thick with emotion, "you've sacrificed so much for me your whole life. You've worked so hard, and you deserve to be comfortable. You deserve a place you can truly call your own, a place to feel safe and happy." He paused for dramatic effect, letting the sentiment hang in the air. The room was silent save for the soft hum of the refrigerator. I felt a swell of pride. For all his occasional thoughtlessness, Leo had such a good heart. This was an incredibly sweet gesture, and that's when he looked directly at his mother, his voice booming with a sick, performative generosity, and said the words that shattered my entire world into a million tiny, irreparable pieces. So, for my New Year's gift to you, I'm giving you this apartment. The knife fell from my hand, clattering onto the floor with a sharp metallic ring that seemed to echo in the sudden deafening silence. Every head in the room, which had been turned to Brenda with soft, adoring smiles, slowly swiveled to face me. Their smiles were frozen, confused. I could only stare at Leo, at his triumphant, beaming face, my mind completely blank except for the frantic, looping thought. He's giving her my apartment? The silence that followed his declaration was a physical thing. It was thick and heavy, pressing in on my ears, sucking all the air and joy out of the room. It was broken only by a single sharp gasp from my best friend Sarah, standing near the drinks table. For a few heartbeats, no one moved. It felt like a scene from a movie, where the camera pans across a tableau of frozen, bewildered faces. My friends looked at me with wide, pitying eyes. His friends looked at Leo, then at me, then at the floor, their expressions a cocktail of confusion and secondhand embarrassment. The 90s love ballad still playing softly in the background suddenly sounded grotesque, a mocking soundtrack to my public humiliation. Then Brenda broke the spell. A sob tore from her throat, a sound of pure, unadulterated joy. "Oh, Leo," she cried, surging up from my velvet sofa. "My darling boy, you didn't!" She rushed towards him, flinging her arms around his neck, burying her face in his shoulder. She was weeping now, loud, theatrical tears of gratitude. "I knew you were a good son. I always knew it." A few of Leo's relatives, his aunt and uncle, started a scattered, uncertain round of applause. It died out almost immediately as they caught sight of my face. I was still rooted to the spot behind the kitchen island, the cold granite biting into my palms. My mind was a frantic, buzzing hive. My apartment. The one I'd poured my life savings into for the down payment. The one where my name, and only my name, was on the mortgage documents sitting in my filing cabinet. The one where Leo paid a portion of the utilities and bought groceries, a contribution he'd insisted was more than fair since I had the security of the asset. I suddenly felt nauseous. Leo, beaming, disentangled himself from his mother's embrace. He looked at me, his eyes shining, his smile so wide and self-satisfied it seemed to split his face in two. He was waiting. He was actually waiting for me to join in, to applaud his magnanimity, to celebrate the fact that he'd just made me homeless as a New Year's present to his mother. "See, Anna," he said, his voice loud enough for the whole room to hear, as if he were explaining a simple concept to a child. "It's perfect. Mom gets a safe place to land. No more worrying about landlords or rent hikes. And us? This is our chance to get something bigger, together. A real family home. We can start looking next week. A real family home." As if the one I had painstakingly built, furnished, and paid for was some kind of temporary playhouse. The patronizing tone, the absolute erasure of me from my own life, snapped something inside me. The buzzing in my ears stopped. A cold, terrifying clarity washed over me. I saw him for what he was, not the charming, adventurous man I thought I loved, but a delusional, narcissistic child playing with my life as if it were a toy. I saw his mother, not as a wary parent, but as a willing accomplice, her eyes now sweeping over my apartment with an unmistakable glint of ownership. She was already mentally rearranging my furniture. Sarah appeared at my elbow, her hand gripping my arm. "Anna," she whispered, her voice shaking with rage on my behalf. "Say something. Tell me this is the worst, most psychotic joke I have ever heard." Her touch was the anchor I needed. It brought me back into my body. I let go of the counter and slowly, deliberately bent down. My fingers wrapped around the cool, smooth handle of the chef's knife I had dropped. The weight of the German steel felt solid, real, in a room that had dissolved into a bizarre fever dream. I straightened up, holding the knife loosely at my side. I didn't raise it. I didn't have to. Every eye was on me. Leo's smile finally faltered, a flicker of confusion clouding his features as he saw my expression. He took a step towards me, his mouth opening to say something, probably to tell me to stop being a spoilsport. I spoke before he could. My voice was quiet, but it sliced through the suffocating atmosphere of the room with surgical precision. It was a voice no one in that room, least of all Leo, had ever heard from me before. "Leo," I said, my gaze locked onto his. "You have 60 seconds to tell your mother that you have made a terrible mistake." His brow furrowed. "Then," I continued, my voice dropping even lower, colder, "you're going to take the keys to my apartment out of your pocket, place them on this counter, and walk out of my front door. And if you or your mother are still in my home when I count to 61, I will call the police and have you both removed for trespassing." The shockwave from my words was more potent than his announcement had been. Leo's face, which had been a mask of triumphant glee, went slack. His jaw literally dropped. For a second, he looked utterly lost, like a child who had just been told that Santa Claus wasn't real. Behind him, Brenda's tear-streaked face hardened, her look of joyous gratitude curdling into something sharp and ugly. The remaining guests, who had been lingering like awkward statues, began to subtly back away, creating a wide, empty, no-man's land between the kitchen and the living room. It was my territory against theirs. "Anna, what the hell are you talking about?" Leo finally sputtered, taking another step forward. His voice was a blend of confusion and annoyance, the tone he used when I asked him to rinse his dishes before putting them in the dishwasher. "Stop being so dramatic. This is a good thing. It's a good thing for us." "One," I said, my voice as flat and unyielding as a slab of granite. The knife in my hand felt less like a weapon and more like a scepter. It was a symbol of my authority in this space. "You are not listening, Leo. This conversation is not a negotiation." Brenda surged forward, planting herself beside her son like a bulldog. "How dare you speak to him like that?" she shrieked, her voice a shrill instrument of indignation. "After this incredible, selfless thing he's done for me. He's trying to build a future, and you're throwing a tantrum like a spoiled child because you have to share your toys." 20, I said, my eyes still fixed on Leo. I was ignoring her completely, and I could see it was infuriating her. The focus of my anger, my entire being, was on the man who had slept in my bed last night, kissed me goodbye this morning, and then stood in my living room and given away my life as if it were a party favor. "Anna, seriously, put the knife down," Leo said, raising his hands in a placating gesture. He was trying to manage me now to de-escalate the scene his own arrogance had created. "You're embarrassing yourself. Our friends are here." "They are my friends, Leo," I corrected him, my voice dangerously soft. "And you are the one who should be embarrassed. You stood in a home you do not own and tried to give it away. You tried to make me homeless on New Year's Eve. What did you think was going to happen? Did you think I would thank you?" His face flushed a deep, ugly red. The corner of his mouth twitched. He wasn't used to this. He was used to charming his way out of everything, of flashing a smile and having his transgressions forgiven. "We're a team, a partnership. What's yours is mine. That's how it works," he blustered, his voice rising in volume, trying to reclaim control of the room. 45, I said, "and for the record, what's mine is mine. My name is on the deed. My money paid the down payment. My salary pays the mortgage every single month. You pay for Netflix and the occasional tank of gas, Leo. That doesn't make you a homeowner. It makes you a guest." Every word was a hammer blow, dismantling the fiction he had built around himself, around us. I saw the truth of it land in his eyes. The humiliation was absolute. He had tried to play the grand benefactor in front of everyone, and I had just exposed him as a freeloader. His friends were now looking at him with a new dawning awareness. My friends, Sarah in the lead, looked like they were ready to form a protective phalanx around me. "You ungrateful bitch," Brenda hissed, her face contorted with rage. "After all he's done for you, letting you be with him." 58, I said, raising my chin. 59. I took a small step forward towards the phone that was sitting on the counter. Leo's eyes darted from my face to the knife to the phone. The fantasy finally shattered. The bravado, the arrogance, it all drained away, replaced by a panicked, cornered look. He knew I wasn't bluffing. The quiet, accommodating Anna he thought he knew was gone, and the woman standing in her place was a complete stranger to him, one who held all the power. "Fine," he spat, the word ripping out of him. He plunged his hand into his pocket, his movements jerky and furious. He pulled out the key ring, the one with my house key, his car key, and the silly little Lego Batman keychain I had bought him, and practically threw it onto the granite countertop. It landed with a loud, final clatter. "Fine. Keep your stupid tiny apartment. I don't want it anyway. We're done. You hear me? Done." He spun on his heel, grabbing his mother's arm. "Come on, Mom, we're leaving." He began to storm towards the door, dragging a protesting Brenda behind him. He didn't even bother to grab his coat from the closet. He reached the door, flung it open, letting a blast of cold January air into the room, and paused on the threshold. He turned back, his face a mask of pure venom, and pointed a trembling finger at me. "You're going to regret this," he seethed. "You're going to be all alone in here, and you're going to regret this for the rest of your life." He and his mother disappeared into the hallway, and he slammed the door behind him so hard that a picture on the wall rattled in its frame. The silence that returned was different this time. It wasn't heavy, it was hollow. My friends slowly started to move towards me, their faces a mixture of shock and concern. Sarah reached me first, gently taking the knife from my unresisting fingers and placing it on the counter. She wrapped her arms around me, but I didn't cry. I was numb, my mind replaying the last 10 minutes on a loop, and then a new thought, cold and sharp as an icicle, pierced through the shock. My key. He'd thrown my key on the counter. But as my eyes scanned the granite, a chilling realization washed over me. The key ring was there, with his car key and the Lego Batman, but my house key wasn't on it. My blood ran cold. The warmth from Sarah's hug evaporated, replaced by a prickling, icy dread. I pulled back, my eyes glued to the key ring on the counter. The Lego Batman stared up at me with his cheerful plastic face, a mocking little sentinel. His car key was there, glinting under the recessed lighting. But the most important key, the brass key to my front door, was gone. The little silver ring that had held it was slightly bent, pried open. He'd done it deliberately. "What is it?" Sarah asked, her voice soft with concern, following my gaze. "Anna, what's wrong?" "The key," I whispered, my voice barely audible. "My key. It's not there." She leaned in closer, squinting at the key ring. Her face tightened. "That son of a bitch." She looked up at me, her eyes wide. "He kept it." The implications slammed into me all at once. He wasn't just gone. He was gone with the ability to come back whenever he wanted. The sanctity of my home, which I had just fought so viciously to reclaim, felt violated all over again. He had left, but he had taken my peace of mind with him. He had a key. His mother, who now saw this place as her stolen inheritance, knew he had a key. The thought of them letting themselves in while I was at work, or worse, while I was asleep, made my stomach clench with a fear so primal it almost buckled my knees. "Okay," I said, pushing down the panic. My adrenaline-fueled rage from moments before was solidifying into a cold, hard resolve. There was no time to fall apart. I was still on a battlefield. "Okay, everyone out." My friends looked at me, startled. "What?" "Anna, we're not leaving you alone." my friend Mark said, stepping forward. I'm serious, I insisted, my voice gaining strength. The party's over. I love you all for being here, but I need you to go. Now. They could see the look in my eyes. It wasn't a request. I needed a clear head, and I needed to secure my home. The lingering scent of Leo's cologne, the half-eaten plate of appetizers he'd abandoned, every trace of him felt like a threat. They understood. With quiet murmurs of support and promises to call me in the morning, they began to gather their things. Sarah gave me one last hard squeeze. Call a locksmith. Tonight. I'll send you the number of a 24-hour guy. Don't wait until morning, she whispered urgently in my ear. I nodded, my throat too tight to speak. Within 10 minutes, my apartment was empty again. The sudden silence was jarring. The remnants of the party, the half-empty glasses, the festive napkins, the abandoned plates of food, looked like artifacts from another lifetime. My beautiful, perfect New Year's Eve was a wasteland. I walked over to the front door and slid the deadbolt across. Then I engaged the security chain, a flimsy piece of metal I'd never once felt the need to use before tonight. It felt laughably inadequate. I leaned my forehead against the cool wood of the door, taking a deep, shuddering breath. The finality of it all crashed down on me. It was over. A year and a half of my life gone. The man I thought I was building a future with had just revealed himself to be a monster of entitlement. But grief would have to wait. Sarah was right. I pulled out my phone and found the locksmith's number she had texted me. A gruff voice answered on the second ring. I explained the situation, leaving out the more dramatic details. Ex-boyfriend kept a key, need the locks changed tonight. He grunted something about a holiday surcharge and said he could be there in an hour. An hour. It felt like an eternity. I walked through my apartment, a stranger in my own home. Every shadow seemed to hold a threat. I checked the windows, making sure the latches were secure. I couldn't sit still. I started to clean, my movements frantic and jerky. I scraped plates into the trash with furious energy, bagged up the half-eaten food, and poured the dregs of the wine down the sink. I needed to erase every trace of him, of them. As I was wiping down the kitchen counter, my phone buzzed. It was a text from an unknown number. My heart leaped into my throat. With trembling fingers, I opened it. The message was a single photo. It was a selfie of Brenda, Leo's mother. She was standing outside in the dark, but the background was unmistakable. It was the front of my building, the familiar brickwork and the glowing number 24 next to the main entrance. She was smiling, a smug, venomous little smirk, and in her hand, she was holding up a key, my key. Beneath the photo, there was a line of text. Don't get too comfortable, dear. A mother knows how to wait for what's hers. A wave of nausea and pure, unadulterated rage washed over me. This wasn't just a threat. This was a promise. This was psychological warfare. They weren't just going to let this go. They were going to torment me. The locksmith was an hour away. The flimsy chain on my door suddenly felt like it was made of paper. I was trapped, a prisoner in the very home I was fighting to protect. And then I heard it. A faint scratching sound. It was coming from my front door. It was the sound of a key sliding into a lock. The sound of that key, my key, sliding into the lock of my door was the most terrifying sound I had ever heard. The quiet, metallic scrape echoed the violation that had been happening all night. My breath hitched in my throat. My first instinct was pure animal fear. I wanted to scream, to run and hide in a closet like a child. But then, the image of Brenda's smug, triumphant face in that selfie flashed in my mind. The rage returned, hot and cleansing, burning away the fear. No, not in my house. I would not be the victim cowering in the dark. I moved silently, my bare feet making no sound on the hardwood floor. I grabbed the heaviest thing I could find in the kitchen, my cast-iron skillet. It was heavy, solid, and felt immensely reassuring in my hands. The scratching stopped, and I heard the lock turn. My deadbolt held. Thank God for the deadbolt. Then came the jiggling of the doorknob, insistent and angry. Whoever was out there, Leo, Brenda, or both, was discovering they couldn't just walk in. A muffled curse came from the other side of the door, followed by a loud, furious pounding. "Anna, open this door, I know you're in there." It was Leo's voice, thick with rage. The prodigal son had returned, not with an apology, but with a demand for entry. "This is private property," I called out, my voice shaking but loud. I positioned myself to the side of the door, my back pressed against the wall, the heavy skillet held ready in both hands. "You are trespassing. I am calling the police." "Don't be ridiculous," he shouted back, his voice vibrating through the wood. "You can't just throw me out. My stuff is in there. My whole life is in there." "Your stuff is in a few drawers and one half of the closet, Leo," I yelled back, my own anger rising to meet his. "And you have 1 minute to get away from my door before I make that call." The pounding stopped. I could hear him and Brenda whispering furiously in the hallway. I didn't wait. My fingers flew across my phone's screen as I dialed 911. With a shaking voice, I told the dispatcher that my ex-boyfriend, from whom I had just separated, was attempting to break into my apartment and was refusing to leave the premises. I gave them my address and name, and they assured me a car was on its way. Just as I hung up, a new sound started, a scraping, metallic sound against the lock. He was trying to pick the deadbolt. The audacity of it was breathtaking, the sheer, unmitigated entitlement. He truly believed this place, this life, was his for the taking. But the sound also told me I had a few minutes. I moved quickly. I grabbed my laptop and opened it to the building's resident portal. A few months ago, after a package had gone missing, I'd convinced the condo board to install security cameras in the hallways, linked to a system residents could access. My heart pounded as I logged in. There they were. The live feed from the camera outside my door showed a scene of pure, pathetic chaos. Leo was crouched down, fiddling with the lock with a credit card, a technique he'd clearly only seen in movies because it was accomplishing nothing. Brenda stood behind him, her arms crossed, urging him on like a villain's sidekick. "Hurry up, Leo. We don't have all night. She's probably calling the cops, the little witch." I hit the record button. I filmed them for a full minute. Leo's pathetic attempts to break in, Brenda's venomous muttering, the clear, undeniable evidence of their harassment and attempted entry. Then I heard the elevator ding at the end of the hall. 2 police officers stepped out, their expressions calm and professional. Leo and Brenda froze like startled rats, caught in the beam of a flashlight. The rest of the night was a blur of official procedure. I showed the officers my deed, my mortgage statements, and the video I had just recorded from the security camera. I showed them the threatening text message from Brenda. They took my statement right there in the hallway while Leo and Brenda stood by, their faces pale and their arrogance completely deflated. Leo tried to argue, to say it was all a misunderstanding, that it was their apartment. But when the officer asked to see his name on a single piece of mail, a utility bill, or the lease, he had nothing. He was just a man with a stolen key, trying to break into a woman's home. The officers gave him a stern warning about criminal trespassing and harassment. They took the key from him, my key, and returned it to me. They then escorted a sputtering, humiliated Brenda and a silent, seething Leo from the building, with a clear order not to return to the property or attempt to contact me in any way. The locksmith arrived shortly after. As he worked, drilling out the old locks and fitting new, high-security ones, the sound was a declaration of freedom. It was the sound of my home becoming mine again, truly and completely. When he handed me the new set of keys, they felt different in my hand, heavier, more meaningful. After he left, I stood alone in the quiet of my apartment. The party decorations looked garish now, remnants of a life that no longer existed. Slowly, methodically, I began to take them down. I unplugged the twinkle lights, took the ornaments off the tree, and packed everything away. It wasn't an act of sadness. It was a cleansing, a reclaiming. I didn't throw out the salad I had been chopping when my world fell apart. Instead, I sat down at my small dining table in my silent, secure apartment and ate it by myself. The pomegranate seeds crunched, the pecans were sweet, and the vinaigrette was perfect. With each bite, I felt a piece of myself coming back. Leo was right about one thing. He'd said I would be all alone in here, and I was. But as the first rays of the New Year's Day sun streamed through my windows, illuminating the dust motes dancing in the air, I realized it wasn't a punishment. It was a gift. I was alone, but I was not lonely. I was safe. I was strong. And for the first time in a very long time, I was completely and utterly free.